in, Minnesota sports fans, to another edition of Twins on SI here on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel. Jonathan Harrison here, joined by Joe Nelson, Will Ragatz, Tony Liebert. Boys, it's a day that Minnesota sports fans have, I believe, very much longed for a very, very, very long time. The Pohlads are selling the Minnesota Twins. They announced in a press release saying, for the past 40 years, the Minnesota Twins have been part of our family's heart and soul. This team is woven into the fabric of our lives, and the Twins community has become an extension of our family, the staff and players, most importantly. And it's with that they've not taken lightly the privilege of owning them, and they are announcing they are selling the club. Boys, I just want to start off getting your initial reactions to this. Joe, I'll let you start. Will, then Tony.
I was shocked. For sure. I mean, I used to work with Joe Pohlad when he ran a previous iteration of Bring Me the News, which is our Minnesota-based news website. Great guy. It seemed like he was being groomed for this opportunity for years, from my perspective, and I had a pretty good seat to see that all unfold. And to see it collapse after only 1 year, I think it speaks volumes about the state of the industry, Major League Baseball. These valuations of teams, they're in the $1 to $2 billion range for most of them that aren't in major markets. I think Sportico had the Twins valued 19th at $1.7 billion earlier this year. And with the collapse of regional TV sports, with Bally Sports North and the debacles there, it's a hard business to be successful in. And they're punting on it. Very obvious. I mean, this is out of left field, and no pun intended there, but they are 100%. It sounds like done with this franchise after 40 years, and I don't know if they've caved to the pressure from local media saying, "Get out, guys! You guys aren't going to take this seriously. This market wants a winner. It wants ownership that's going to spend money and gets aggressive and brings a title back here for the first time in 30 plus years." I don't know what happened, but a pretty shocking day and a historic day here in Minnesota sports.
Will?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I certainly did not expect this. And I don't know behind the scenes what the reason for this is, whether it has something to do with the increased social media cry for them to sell the team. And generally that happens in a lot of with a lot of sports franchises, and the owners don't just say, okay, yeah, you know, you're right. So I'm sure there's something behind the scenes with the financials and whatnot. But yeah, like Joe said, a valuation north of 1.5 billion. I mean, it's a good gig generally to own sports teams because they just keep accumulating in value. But when there's so many things going on, like with the regional sports networks and the TV deals and a lot of chaos recently, I guess they decided that now is the time. So I'm optimistic. I mean, I think our thoughts on the Pohlads and the decision last year to slash payroll by around $30 million has been made known. I was not a fan of that decision, but I'm optimistic. I mean, you know, there's always the risk, I suppose, that somebody could come in. I'm sure some jaded fans will think about the possibility of, you know, worse ownership coming in and the possibility of relocation or things like that. I just don't think that's going to happen. This is a great market for sports, a great market for baseball. That's been proven. I'm optimistic that an owner is going to buy this team, or an ownership group that really plans on spending money and building a consistent winner here. And that would be quite exciting if that were to happen.
Tony?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone could have seen this coming. I thought Chip Scoggins had an interesting tweet. He said that, I guess just his tweet word for word, he said, "This season represented an inflection point for the Pohlads." He said that he wrote 2 weeks ago he'd never seen a fan base this angry at ownership in his 25 years covering Minnesota sports. And he said he didn't believe they could undo the PR damage or win back trust, which I just thought was pretty interesting. He's a guy who's well connected. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people were pressuring them to sell the team. So I think it's very interesting timing. And with pro sports, a lot of people are always going to get angry at ownership when there's not consistent success. And I think it'll be interesting to see where things go from here, because this is what brings excitement into a fan base, because it brings hope that there can be change now, because it's going to have different leadership. So I think it comes at a very interesting time, and it seems that the Pohlads didn't want to deal with the pushback anymore.
Yeah, and I want to talk about what happens next, but that kind of leads off to a question that I want to ask you guys. How much do you think the negative PR about them slashing payroll and how this season played out and how it felt like after getting to the playoffs last year and playing as well as they did, they should have built on it and they did the exact opposite. How much do you think that affected or impacted this decision to sell now when it feels like this feels very much like it came out of the blue? As Joe said, it felt like with Joe now with the new change at the ownership, it felt like that there was going to be that they were going to be here for a while longer, and now it's just out of the blue, done after a year, Joe.
Well, I just think this raises a lot of questions about when these conversations began. Now, they said in a statement in their press release that these conversations started over the summer. I don't know that I believe that. It's very possible that's true, but the fact that you reduce payroll by nearly $30 million after making a charge in the playoffs last season tells me that maybe there was something in the works, at least on the upper end, that nobody else knew about starting at the end of last season. Who knows? It could even go back further than that. You got to imagine they've been struggling on the business side of things with ticket sales and the Bally Sports North debacle that has inflicted damage on fans for years. This just didn't come out of the blue, if you ask me. So I don't know what kind of ownership group thinks the world is going to believe them when we say, well, we have one of the best records in the American League. Carlos Correa's red hot. Royce Lewis looks like a superstar. In the middle of the summer is when we said, yeah, we'll start talking about this potential sale. I mean, if anything, that makes absolutely no sense. The Twins looked like a team that could contend this year. They had Pablo Lopez. They had Bailey Ober. It's just a really odd time to say, yeah, this is now when we're going to start talking about when we might sell this thing, unless it's all just directly related to the bleeding on the TV revenue. But there's a lot of questions I have, too. You try to connect the dots here, and you're like, well, not only did you slash payroll by nearly $30 million from one year to the next, but then you dumped Bally at the end of this season and Diamond Sports Group, and you're going in the less revenue favorable world of MLB.TV handling production and distribution to your local audience. Yeah, you reach more people, but you don't have that giant network to sell to advertisers. That's less valuable on a whole. And then don't forget, they also just announced a very mysterious multi-year extension with WCCO Radio to remain the flagship network and station for radio broadcasts. Why is it a multi-year extension? Why can't you tell tell fans if it's a 3-year or a 4-year deal? I mean, the Vikings just reached a 7-year deal with KFAN and the Vikings radio network. That's a very unspecific thing, which to me says it's a 2-year deal. Now, I don't know for sure, but you don't want to go out and say, yeah, we're doing 2 years. But if you've got new ownership coming in and you're aware that things are going to be changing and you really don't know or trust the state of radio going forward and streaming, yeah, you call it a multi-year deal, you sign it, and then you punt that press release into space and nobody asks any questions, right? You've got your contract. You're good to go. And then Thad Levine, that was a really odd thing too. He's your 8-year general manager who just suddenly steps down, right? Okay, he's pursuing other opportunities. Well, why is he pursuing other opportunities? To me, it feels like a money cut because there was no indication from your chief baseball officer, Derek Falvey, that you're going to replace that GM job. You're just going to say, okay, I'm the chief baseball officer. We're going to have everybody else on my staff handle the slack that's left from Levine's exit. So there's a lot of moving parts here that speak to the secrecy of the conversations that clearly were happening in the dark before it came to light today. But 100%, I do not buy that this thing was just a sudden conversation in the summer and now they're going full force towards a sale.
Yeah, so what's next for this squad? There's so much that, obviously, as Joe, you pointed out, will change. You wrote about this, Joe, over at Twins on SI. What's next? How fast could this sale happen? Do we have any idea of who these potential new owners could be? Because I can't imagine that you announce that you're selling the team and you don't already have potential buyers lined up.
I agree with that. I don't think anybody knows how fast this could go, but I was looking at the most recent MLB sale, and it was the Baltimore Orioles, where back in January of this year, the previous owner announced that they were going to sell. By the end of January, they had an agreement in place, and by March, there was a new ownership group, right? Okay. That happened in the span of 3 months. So, could we see something like that happen? If the Pohlads don't want to be involved in 2025, you would imagine that this thing happens rather quickly. And I think you're right on the money, Jonathan, when you say, well, hey, gut feeling here is that you don't make this announcement unless you've already got something kind of in the pipeline and you have knowledge that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement. I mean, I think this isn't something that just they woke up today on October 10th and decided to announce their intent to explore a sale. I mean, this has probably been in the works for a while, which, like Joe said, leads to a lot of questions with, the broadcast side of things, the Thad Levine decision, Joe Pohlad's comments to Twins reporters just a couple of weeks ago, where he was talking about treating this thing just like a business and, declining to make real comments on what next year's payroll would look like. It's all kind of fascinating, like just speculating maybe how long that this has been in the works and how long they've been pondering doing something like this. But yeah, if they want to get out, then like Joe said, I think they probably have something or have some possibilities of buyers lined up. And I think this thing probably gets done by the start of next season, if not earlier.
Tony, do we expect changes in the front office or even the coaching staff, the managerial staff, with this change? Because a new owner may want to come in, may look at how things have been done, and may want changes. Do you expect that to happen, or do you think that what's in place right now is safe?
Yeah, like Joe mentioned, I think with Thad Levine stepping down, I think that kind of is proof that there was stuff going on behind the scenes, because that just doesn't typically happen out of thin air. And it's interesting when selling a sports franchise, because your market of buyers is obviously much smaller than a typical sale of a business, but not many people have billions of dollars to buy a sports team. So I would assume there's, like Joe and Will mentioned, that there's probably an idea of buyers that they're going to want to look at, or people that are semi-interested already. But at the Boston Celtics, after they won the championship, they said that they were going to sell the team, and nobody has stepped up there yet, I believe. So it's going to be an interesting thing to follow. I'm not sure if they're going to make changes in the front office. I think that is something that's only going to be able to be known until the person who buys the team, because we've seen how aggressive that Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry were with the Timberwolves, bringing in Tim Connolly almost immediately after they got in the ownership group. So if it's someone like that, they could decide to make a change pretty quickly and have guys on a short list that they want to bring in. But that's, I guess, something that we're only going to know until they get the deal done.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's job is in danger right now. I think Thad Levine leaving was the big one. There's a couple ways you can look at this, right? And one of them is that even if you sell the team in 3 months, the current ownership group has said that Rocco Baldelli and Derek Falvey are going to be back, right? So you've got your chief baseball officer and your manager. They're going to be back in 2025. If you have new ownership come in and they're like, well, hey, no, we don't think that's a good idea. Yeah, that could happen. But your prospect pool of replacements is going to be thinned out by the time a sale actually happens, because other jobs are going to open. When the World Series wraps up, other teams are going to move on from their general managers, chief baseball officers, managers, and they're going to suck up the best talent before new ownership can even come in and do anything. So I think 2025 remains very much the same. When Baltimore sold in January, they did not replace their general manager. They did not replace their manager on the bench in the dugout. And those guys are expected to be back again in 2025 after 91 wins this season. So, it's very possible that if the team is sold before the start of next season, new ownership looks at 2025 as a prove-it ground to say, hey, Falvey, hey, Baldelli, show us that you actually deserve to be here in the long term. And, we'll make that decision after the 2025 season.
How do we think this impacts the Twins this offseason? Because we know that there's some changes on the roster that probably need to happen, and there'll be players and talent on the open market. With the team kind of in flux here, how do we think that changes or impacts their offseason plans, Will?
I don't know that it necessarily does. I mean, I think it's something that's, until a sale is completed, it's going to kind of be just a cloud, whether that's a light cloud or dark cloud, however you want to look at it, kind of hanging over all of the operations, similar to what we've seen with the Timberwolves, where just this whole ownership picture. And I don't think it's going to get into some messy will they, won't they sell thing like with Glenn Taylor and Mark Laurie and A-Rod, but it'll be just kind of there until it gets finalized. I still think you would imagine that Derek Falvey will have the full go-ahead to just kind of operate as usual, whether it's still the Pohlads owning them or whether the new ownership comes in. So I don't know that it necessarily has to impact anything the Twins do this offseason, which, for the record, is not going to be some splashy, exciting offseason unless they were to sell very quickly and get a real sudden pledge to boost payroll for the 2025 season. I don't really see that happening just with the timeline of things. So I would imagine that it doesn't affect the offseason all that much, but who knows? We're gonna find out if this thing gets done quickly or if it's still next spring and we're waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, what's interesting, guys, is that the timing could be really good, because if you can get a deal done by January or even February, and you have a new ownership group coming in flush with cash and a willingness to spend, which tends to happen, right? You want to make a statement. You want to let your local fan base know that you're interested in winning. You could see that happen. And the good news is, guys, is that the way free agency has worked in recent seasons is that a lot of guys, the big name contracts, they're not signing their deals to set the market rates for everybody else until late February or even March, right up until the start of spring training, and even sometimes when spring training is actually happening. The Twins didn't do anything really all last offseason until Carlos Santana signed, and I think that was that was pretty late, I think. I don't think that was an early deal, but regardless, things have gotten pushed down the road, and if that's the case, again, this offseason, that could bode well for any new ownership group that wants to come in and immediately push some cash into this roster.
Yeah, that's the best case scenario, that they get something done fairly quickly and somebody comes in looking to spend, and we could start talking about some exciting possibilities for 2025. I guess I'm a little skeptical of that, just because I think the Orioles thing, from what I've just seen with ownership transitions, was kind of on the quicker side, and these things sometimes can take 6 months or whatever it may be. So we'll see, but that would be very exciting if this thing gets moving quickly.
Well, I did some research on this, guys, and with Baltimore, their payroll this season was $90 million. That was an increase of $30 million from last year. And 2 years ago, under the old ownership, they had a $43 million payroll. That's extremely low. And they've got a $90 million payroll. They went out and signed Corbin, or traded for Corbin Burns. He's going to have a big contract this offseason. They're probably going to try to bring him back. And then a lot of the reason it's only $90 million is because you built a really young roster that's got a lot of talent that's on rookie deals. But Steve Cohen, playing in his own ballpark there in New York, I mean, he took that payroll when he bought the team in 2020. In 21, it was $195 million, and then it was $264 in 2022, and each of the last 2 years has been right around $330 million. Now, that's obviously never going to happen here in Minnesota because you're not dealing with the same kind of metrics. But Kansas City's a fair comparison. They were sold in 2019 to a guy named John Sherman. He bought them for $1 billion that November. 2020 was COVID year, so everything was a little bit screwy, but they had an $89 million payroll in 2021, and this year it's up to $115. So they've trended in the higher payroll directions in all of these cases when new ownership comes in. So if the same happens for the Twins, we should expect a better roster with more money pushed into it when new ownership takes over, eventually.
Is this a roster where, as you just pointed out and laid out, new ownership tends to come in, wants to make a good impression, starts to drop a load of cash on the roster and upgrading it. Is this a roster that, if you do that, can compete very quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can squint and make the case that they can contend next year with 130 million payroll if they could just get their stars to stay healthy, which is a massive if when you're talking about Buxton and Correa and Lewis. But I mean, if Joe Ryan's back and the pitching, some of the young pitching translates, David Festa, Simeon Woods Richardson, guys like that. If you can get more than 270 combined games out of the big three in the lineup, assuming that Royce Lewis is the version of himself we saw before the last 2 months of this season. They've got a lot of talent, and they've got guys coming up with Emmanuel Rodriguez and Brooks Lee, who arrived last year, and Luke Keyshaw, and you got Walker Jenkins coming down the line in a couple years. Like there's a lot of talent here that could compete with a 130 million payroll in theory, but if that's boosted back to 160 like it was in 2023 or even higher than that, you're talking about some really exciting possibilities of being able to supplement the core, make some real bullpen additions, add another starter for depth and competition, add another legit piece or two to the lineup. Like we could start talking about a team that has a chance to be very good, because you've got Correa and Buxton under contract for a long time, and there's injury risks there, but when those guys are healthy, I mean, they both generated like 4 wins above replacement in 80, 90 games each. Well, Buxton got to 100, but I mean, if those guys played full seasons, they're 6, 7, 8 win players. That's how good they are. So not every team has that, and the Twins do. They need health, and they need to supplement it with good moves on the margins, because last offseason, working within the payroll constraints, just every move that they made outside of Carlos Santana was a complete and utter flop.
Yeah, and maybe the new owners will instill a mindset that prospects are assets to go out and pay for proven players at the trade deadline, rather than just stock up on farm talent and hope to God it develops at a cheap price for the future. That works sometimes, but this is professional sports, and sometimes you got to go out there and pay for the best players to have a shot in the postseason. And I as a fan of baseball, I love seeing that happen. And it's what the Yankees do. It's what the Mets do. It's what the Orioles are starting to do. Even the Royals this year went out and did that at the trade deadline. And look at them. They're in the divisional round trying to play the juggernaut Yankees, and they almost beat them in game number 3 to go up 2-1 on Wednesday night. They didn't get it done, but backs against the wall. They're still more competitive because they went out and made some moves and gave up some assets to do it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that fans are wanting from the ownership is just to take risks. I think that was the most frustrating thing in the offseason, because they had all the momentum from the playoff appearance, and then they just kind of sat on their hands and just hoped and prayed that one of these prospects would blossom into a major contributor this year. And when you see other teams in comparable markets like Kansas City or Baltimore begin to take those risks, I think that's all what fans are looking and hoping for. So whoever ends up buying the team, I guess it's very simple, but it's something that the Pohlads just did not do at the back end of their tenure as owners. And it's something that the new ownership group will, I guess, need to do if they want to get excitement back into the fan base.
Last question for you guys, and I'll go around the horn here. Joe, Will, Tony. Is this enough to return the fan excitement that clearly had just dissipated by the end of this last season as the season wore on, and it clearly showed that the team wasn't going to really invest too much into this squad? Is this enough to return that fan investment and fan excitement?
Look to yourself. Season? Look to yourself. How do you feel right now?
Well, I'm going to be honest. I feel excited, but I'm also a little bit nervous because there's too much right going on in Minnesota sports, and I'm not used to it.
Trauma alert. No, I think you just look internally and feel the excitement of change that could blossom into something very beautiful and different after 40 years of kind of penny pinching, right? So, yeah, there's excitement. And I think it will definitely change the outlook for 2025 and beyond. It's just a matter of when's this sale happen, right? As long as the Pohlads are in control of this team, people are going to be apathetic because they know what to expect. So if this sale gets done before the start of the season, I think there's going to be a wave of excitement.
Will?
Yeah, again, I mean, I mentioned this earlier. I just don't see a world where somebody pays the 1.7 billion or whatever it is, comes in, slashes payroll further, and expects to make money doing that because of what that would do to fan excitement. I don't think there's any chance of moving the team or anything. I think this is really good news. This is exciting. This is a franchise that, since the 1991 World Series, which was 6 years before I was born, they have won one playoff series in, I think, 31, 32 seasons, whatever that is. They won two because they broke the streak last year against the Blue Jays, but the sustained success has not been there for this franchise. So I think this is a really exciting day, full of possibilities of building something that could be a sustainable contender, and then could bring a lot of excitement to Target Field in Minneapolis. And I think this is a really exciting day.
Tony?
Yeah, I think that's the only reaction you can have, is to be excited, because it is changed to something that clearly wasn't working. But if it does happen right away and they sell the team in January or February, like we've talked, I think only good things can come from that. But the only way I think that this becomes a little annoying to the fan base is if the sale doesn't happen right away and it carries on into the season, and then there just becomes more and more questions. Well, yeah, I mean, you have to like this because something's going to change, and that's only a good thing for Twins fans.
Are you saying it would be annoying to have two different ownership groups and ownership sales in flux at the same time?
Yeah, very. That would be very annoying.
Where has that happened before? Yeah. I mean, the point is, guys, is that if this sale doesn't get done before the start of the season, the Twins are on record saying they're selling. They're not going to spend a dime to improve anything.
Yep.
They're going to take the valuation as it is and say, go with what you have, roster. Go with what you have, manager. Go with what you have, chief baseball officer. Make whatever you have now work. We're not touching a damn thing. We're not trading anybody. We're not doing anything. You can expect a roster that looks identical to this that we just finished the season with to go in and compete next year. And like Will said, yeah, it's good enough to compete if it's healthy, but I got a feeling that'll be about as handcuffed as a franchise will ever be, which is essentially what they just went through this season. So got to happen. Got to happen before the start of the season if you want to have any hope of improving things next year.
Absolutely. Exciting times for sure, as you guys have said.
Vikings are 5-0. Sorry to cut off your outro, but Vikings 5-0. Pohlad selling. Wolves have Dante DiVincenzo. The Wild might not be horrible. The Lynx are in the WNBA final. I mean, this is good stuff, guys.
Gophers beat USC? I mean, what?
Yeah.
Hey, it took an antidote of confidence to do that, but
a literal capsule of Sprite. Way to go, PJ Fleck.
Bugs Bunny.
Good times.
That will do it for another edition of Twins on SI here on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel. We'll cover it all for you over on Twins on SI. Go read Joe, Tony, and Will's work over there. We'll come back with another video right back here on the channel later this week as we continue to discuss everything Minnesota sports. Make sure to hit subscribe. Does help us get found. Also keeps you in the loop on when we drop a new video here on the channel. Hit that subscribe button and the like button on this video. Does boost it up in the ratings. We'll talk to you later, Minnesota sports fans.